Good afternoon to our viewers in Germany and good morning to our viewers in the United States. Hello, I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Kaffeepause. This is our regular check-in with a journalist based in Berlin to talk about the news stories behind the headlines. And today we're joined by Nette Nöstlinger. She's a politics reporter for Politico and based in Berlin. Nette, herzlich willkommen.
Dankeschön. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. And I'd like to sort of start our conversation with the question that I often ask at the beginning of the Kaffeepause, which has to do with the current mood in Berlin. Today's the first day that the Bundestag is back in session, so the summer break is officially over. But what is sort of that current mood as politicians go back to work?
Yes, indeed. So today, parliamentarians are convening in Berlin for the first time. Again, I think there was a break of around 8 weeks over the summer, where they have been going to their home constituencies, talking to people and organizations at home. I don't want to be too dramatic or sound too dramatic, but the mood is pretty dire, I would say, at least if we look at the polls. So there has been a poll last week where Metz's approval rating, or more likely the approval rating of the government, of the coalition that Metz is leading, fell to a record low of just 22%, who said they were satisfied with the government at this point. And this is just after 4 months in office. And these numbers stand in really stark opposition when we look at the things that Metz promised. Like one of Metz's main promises was actually to turn around the mood within German society before summer. And this is something I think, that we see according to numbers that he has failed to do, and that he probably underestimated a bit how difficult or how easy it is to change the mood when it comes to how people view politics and politicians.
So I think you and I spoke last in May, and of course at that point the Merz government with his coalition of Christian Democrats and Social Democrats was very new, and we talked a little bit about some of the domestic priorities that he had laid out, and in addition to the one that you just mentioned of wanting to sort of turn around the mood and sort of re-engage and re-excite Germany, the top priority was really jumpstarting the German economy and getting that going again. Can you talk a little bit about how those efforts are going, and if that sort of contributes to the poor approval ratings that Merz is now getting?
Yeah. Merz has not been particularly successful in revamping the German economy. I mean, the German economy is in a difficult situation. So just maybe for some extra context. So of course, Germany was very hard hit economically, also after the Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, which contribute to very high energy prices, which is of course very difficult for the German industry, which was very dependent on Russian energy and Russian gas. And basically 2022, 2023, and 2024, the economy has not grown. It's been stagnating or even going backwards. So it has been a problem for a couple of years already. And last week, the two most important economic institutes, think tanks, also downgraded their forecasts for economic growth this year. So one said they are now forecasting 0.1% growth and the other one 0.2. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's it's not the reboost or the revamp that Metz has promised. And I think the dire approval ratings also, of course, have to do with how the economy is doing. And then I think there is a lot of frustration about Merz presenting himself in the first months, as they like to say in Germany, as an Außenkanzler, or a chancellor that has really focused on foreign politics, on the transatlantic relationship with the US, on trying to have a good understanding with US President Donald Trump, saving the NATO alliance, as Matt would say so himself, and everything that happened in Ukraine. And now the task for the government is really, I guess, to focus on domestic politics, on the economy, and on some structural reforms that are necessary. And that's also what Matt is planning to do.
So let me come back to the economy in just a second because I have a question or two related to that. But first, this whole um, discussion around Merz as the Außenkanzler. He obviously seems to be very comfortable on the international stage. Some people have even said that that's probably an arena where he feels even more comfortable than when it comes to dealing with some domestic issues. But I had read somewhere, and it might even have been in Politico today or over the weekend, that Merz was planning on giving a big speech early this week to sort of disabuse people of the notion that he is the Außenkanzler and wanting to basically make the argument that um, foreign policy is also important for domestic policy, and domestic policy relates to foreign policy, and that the two are intertwined, and that part of the reason why he's had this focus on international affairs for Germany has been because it ultimately does affect what's going on domestically, and the war in Ukraine is one example of that. Can you talk a little bit about this sort of narrative on his part?
Yeah. So the speech you're referring to just happened like 1 hour ago. It was a speech Mads gave in the foreign ministry, where today, tomorrow, and on Wednesday, all German ambassadors are convening for the ambassador conference. Mads spoke there, which already was um, yeah, a special appearance, so to say. In it's the first time in, I think, 2 or 3 decades that a chancellor has appeared at this conference to talk to the ambassadors. So it's kind of already underlines again how important foreign policy is to Chancellor Merz. And I think this sentence, the one that you referred to, saying that he's so focused on foreign policy because this is essentially important for what happens inside Germany when it comes to the economy, when it comes to security, it's, yeah, I guess it's really to be interpreted as a line of defense against discontent in the population and also in media, that he has been so focused on politics abroad and not necessarily at home and inside his coalition. If you really look at domestic politics, there has also been some disunity in the coalition, which Merz has not been able to resolve. So yeah, I see it more as a, I mean, of course, there is also some truth behind it. Everything is linked and so on, but I see it more as a line of defense against media reports and discontent.
But I think there's also something else there that's important to point out, which is the chancellery is obviously in the hands of the Christian Democrats and Friedrich Merz for the first time in some 60 years. The foreign ministry is in the hands of the Christian Democrats with Joe Wadephul as foreign minister. And so it seems maybe to be a more welcoming environment for the CDU chancellor to come to the CDU-led foreign office. It certainly seemed like there was a tension between Olaf Scholz when he was chancellor and Annalena Baerbock when she was the foreign minister. And so there wasn't as likely sort of an appearance of the chancellor in the foreign office at that time.
Yes, this is most definitely true. And this is also something that both Chancellor Merz and Foreign Minister Wadephul always like to underscore and to point out time and time again, and which once again illustrates the importance of foreign policy and European policy for this administration.
So I'd like to maybe come back to the economy before we pick up on a couple of other topics. And that is that the new economics minister, Katharina Reiche, has talked about really developing a industrial policy, economic policy for Germany that would help restart the German economy. Um, Over the summer, I didn't really hear too much about what those plans were. I know there was a little bit of a roadshow that she and some others had made in Germany over the summer to talk about the need for growth But have you heard anything more about sort of the concrete plans to try to strengthen the German economy?
Mhm. Yeah, economic policy is not something that I follow very, very closely, but so it's a bit difficult at this point for me to speak about concrete plans. But what we know from Katharina Reich is that one of her top priorities is to bring down energy prices for industry. Germany has a very industry heavy economy still, as opposed to other European countries where there is maybe more focus on services. Your industry is very important; it's very export driven industry. Then we know from Katharina Reich that she is, as she herself would say, or as the current government would say, they call it energie offen. So that means that they are turning away from a strong focus on building out renewables or green energy. So there is a shift if we compare this to the former government where Robert Habeck was really trying to, yeah, make German industry a green industry and transform that. Otherwise, in this week, there is the German car show in Munich, and we know that two sectors, which now in autumn also will be in focus of the government, and where Merz, for example, has said that he will organize summits, is the car industry on the one side and then the steel industry on the other side. So I think the government will try to talk to CEOs and so on, but then also really get policies going to support these industries. There's, for example, a question if what way they're going to go when it comes to cars. Are they going to hand out subsidies again for example, people to be buying renewable electric cars or not? So I think they still have to find like a line of approach, policy lines, how and when to support industry.
And I guess the other big element in this is also the emphasis by this government on digitalization, and the digital minister Carsten Wildberger has also been making the rounds and trying to promote a better sort of infrastructure for the digital economy as well moving forward.
Yeah.
Um, there was just a question that was submitted that actually ties into one of the topics I wanted to raise with you, namely Ukraine policy as well. And the question reads, if the focus is on lowering energy prices and a drop in the focus on renewables, does this imply a need to be more accommodating of Russia?
Yeah, I mean, it depends who you ask. I guess there have been voices in both coalition parties, so in Metz's conservative bloc and in the SPD, the center-left party, saying that maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to, at some point, again establish energy ties with Russia. I mean, these are really minority voices. So if we look in those who are in power, the ministers and also Chancellor Merz is saying like, no way, we are not going to do that. Of course, it remains to be seen how that is going to develop in like a couple of years from now. But there is a very clear focus, I would say, from this government on diversification of energy sources and closing different deals with different countries, American LNG, but also maybe Canadian LNG, and then of course like from Arab countries and so on. So yeah, I guess we will see how this develops and what deals are going to be made. Chancellor Merz also announced in his speech just now in the foreign ministry that he's going to travel to a lot of countries who are unrelated to the transatlantic partnership and who were maybe not so much in focus of Germany and German industry before, Central Asia and so on in the coming weeks. So maybe we will see some new deals, agreements, or at least like memorandums of understanding from these travels. Yeah.
So sticking with Ukraine, though, there are two things I wanted to ask you about. One is sort of how is Mats reacting to the continued attacks by Russia on Ukraine, which spiked again over the weekend. He's somebody who felt very strongly about putting a ceasefire in place, and how has he been responding?
Of course, he has condemned the attacks in very clear words over the weekend and also now in his speech. Um, Yeah, and he's also one of the people inside the European Union who are, of course, bringing forward the new sanctions package. And I
Yeah.
think this is something he has been working on, together with his people, his aides, his advisors, and so on. And then, of course, I think one of the most important things for the chancellor in Berlin is to put pressure on the U.S. administration or try to influence them as yeah as much as they can. I think the mood has kind of changed in the beginning. I mean, we know when Merz won the election, he was very, very critical on election night. He said, like, we need to become independent of the US and so on. But then over the months, he has tried to build this relationship of understanding with the US president. And there was this sense that Germany was actually a country which would be able to maybe influence Donald Trump when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, that Merz has his phone number and can call him and so on. But I think in recent weeks, um, yeah, there is rather hope than confidence. Let's put it that way. If you speak
Hmm.
to people like close to the government in Berlin or from the government, they are very reluctant to to make predictions or to really put trust into something that Trump has said. It's more like the principle of hope and trying to kind of massage or influence decisions that are being made. But I mean, I think it's clear that without the US, movement is really difficult when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, when it comes to peace, but also when it comes to sanctioning Russia or really hurting the regime, for example.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's very difficult because one has to balance both things. I mean, I think you're right that it's hard to move forward without support from Washington. On the other hand, it seems as if Europe and the EU specifically is trying to take some action and to keep the ball moving. I mean, this is, after all, the 19th
Yeah.
sanctions package that the EU is talking about, and it focuses heavily on discussions around the purchase of Russian oil and gas. And so, this ties in with the previous question, of course, but it also raises questions about whether or not the Europeans should put more pressure on Hungary and Slovakia, who still seem to be purchasing Russian oil through third countries. Um, to what degree is that something that Merz has been talking about, or that others in Berlin are focused on?
They have been focused on this because and I think it became even more apparent in there was a coalition of the willing meeting last week, where the coalition of the willing meeting is a format where the closest allies of Ukraine try to coordinate help, but also think about security guarantees, for example, in the event that peace is reached. It's many European countries, but also Japan, for example, or Canada, and so on. Anyway, so they coordinated their help for Ukraine, talked about security guarantees, and then they met with President Donald Trump. And apparently, when the European leaders tried to pressure Trump to sanction, for example, Russia, or implement secondary sanctions, he told them that something in the sense of like, you shouldn't really be pressuring me because you guys in Europe, you have these two countries who are still buying Russian gas and oil, and first you need to get your own, or first you need to do your own homework before you can lecture me. So I think this problem of these two countries that are basically going the other direction, or not walking in line with the rest of Europe, it has become a bigger priority after this meeting, and
Hmm.
it's definitely something that is being looked at. Then, if we think about other possibilities, of course, there is the whole question of the Russian assets that are frozen. Right now, the European Union has frozen these assets in Belgium, and they are using the windfall profits. But one idea would be to use the assets themselves to as aid for Ukraine, or also to help rebuild Ukraine. This is something which Germany has been a bit reluctant to do, but something that is also being looked at in Chancellery, and something that will be on the agenda of the next EU summit. So this could
Hmm.
be like, if they decide to change course on the assets, I think this will be a game changer. Is maybe too much, but it won't be like another sanctions package. I think it's something
Yeah.
more.
I mean, it's certainly ratcheting things up, and it's
Mhm.
definitely worth watching in that sense. Sticking with the conflict, you and your colleague James Angelos had a piece about Russian disinformation and the
Mhm.
fact that Friedrich Merz has been sort of in the spotlight when it comes to disinformation, but that it's very, very difficult for German authorities to actually counter all of the falsehoods that are coming out through this, disinformation campaign. Can you share with us a little bit of sort of what you and James focused on in that
Mhm.
story, and how this is a new wave of disinformation, and what sort of an impact it's having?
Yeah. Um, so we spoke to security experts and also some intelligence officials for this piece. What came apparent was that there has been a shift. Like, Russian disinformation was focused on the U.S. For a long time, and still is, of course. But after the 2024 election, re-election of President Trump, there seems to really have been a focus towards Europe and the European continent, and then within Europe, a focus on Germany. So just numbers wise, it has increased. Also, of course, the more you advance, the more advanced the content of disinformation has come. We've looked at one specific example where Mads is being accused of shooting a polar bear mom and her two polar bear children during a private hunting trip in Canada when he was at the G7, which never happened. But it's fake videos produced with AI with fake witnesses. So really, people giving statements saying that
Mhm.
they have seen it happen, pictures of bloody animals, and so on. And exactly the same campaign also happened with Kamala Harris in the U.S. Before the election. Like, she was accused of killing a rhino when she was in Zambia during her Africa trip. So we also see these narratives, discourse, and strategies being recycled, basically. Um, Otherwise, we see that Friedrich Merz is a main target because he has such a clear stance when it comes to supporting Ukraine, and has been really tough on Russia. And what is also apparent is that in the last German government, there was more focus on the Green politicians because they are more like the polarizing figures. I mean, in the end, the goal is always to destabilize the government and to basically saw mistrust also in government and to destabilize mainstream politicians who are at power. And I think in the last government, the main calculus was to do this via the Greens and make them as polarizing as possible. But now we see a really clear focus on Mats. Like, he's a polarizing figure as well. And of course, if we think strategically about what the main aim of the Russian disinformation is, it's to strengthen the AfD, to sow
Mhm.
distrust, and to also use Merz as a polarizing figure in governing with this left wing party, but still wanting to be right, and then basically just making him lose his credibility. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and that leads to, part of the reason why there are these tensions within the coalition too.
Hmm.
I mean, part of it is that neither party did particularly well in the election. They were sort of forced together because there wasn't really a good alternative. The Social Democrats were able to sort of negotiate a strong position within the government from very weak results.
Hmm.
This government came in saying that they wanted to keep any tensions sort of in the back room and not on display to the public, which is what had happened in the previous government. That doesn't seem to be working so well. Part of that is maybe Merz's polarizing uh, personality, but part of it is also some of the issues that are being addressed. You talked a little bit about the AfD just now. The AfD is seeing its sort of numbers go up in some of the polls at the moment, particularly around if there were a Sonntagswahl, right, an election in the upcoming weekend, the AfD would do even better. And there's a real sort of debate in each of the political parties about what it would mean to ban the AfD. I think another big topic where there are fundamental differences are around the social welfare services that are provided and how to finance them. Let's
Yeah.
maybe talk about each of these two things in turn. Can you talk a little bit about the current debate over a ban of the AfD and where the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats sort of land on that?
Hmm. Yeah, when it comes to banning the AfD, which in Germany is possible, it's possible to ban parties. And I mean, people are still figuring out how likely it is that a ban would really go through because basically you have to prove that a party is really endangering the constitutional order and the democratic system. It's possible due to Germany's Nazi history, and it's basically a way to prevent, yeah, the Nazi era from happening again. That's why, as German politicians would say, the fathers and the mothers of the constitution have given us these tools as politicians to, yeah, to prevent the past from happening again. Um, but there is a really clear divide, quite easy to see, between the left wing political spectrum and the right wing political spectrum. So people inside Matz's conservatives are very reluctant to ban the party. They say we need to fight the party with political means. A ban is not going to help. And then, of course, there is also the danger of yeah, politically starting the process of a ban, but then, for example, a court deciding that it's not possible. And I think politicians on each side of the spectrum are really kind of afraid of this scenario
Hmm.
happening, and then of course the AfD profiting from it politically in the end. When we look at the left wing side of the spectrum, for example, in like the Greens and the Left Party are quite united. I think they think it's their historic responsibility, and that with these tools given to them by the Constitution, they should be looking at a ban and bringing forward a ban. The SPD, so Matz's coalition party, the Social Democrats, they are more split. There are different voices inside the party. At their party conference 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, maybe last month, they have agreed upon like a way forward to, or taking next steps to ban the party. But basically, it's the party leadership now who has to decide, and who are also like looking into it at this
Hmm.
moment. There was an interview yesterday with one of the leaders of the SPD. The Greens have basically asked them to work together on this, and she said it's something that they are going to look into.
Hmm. I mean, this is obviously a topic to be watching, particularly with a view to um, state elections next
Hmm.
year, and just to see, how this plays out and what sort of a role the AfD plays as a spoiler. Um,
Hmm.
I have to think that some of the debate around social welfare services and how to finance them also feeds into the popularity of the AfD and sort of a sense among many voters that they don't feel represented, that they don't feel that their needs are being addressed. Can you talk a little bit about this debate, particularly between the two governing coalition partners, um, over whether taxes should be increased, services cut? Um, I even heard today that there's now sort of maybe even a discussion about a Agenda 2030, which is sort of designed to conjure up Gerhard Schröder's Agenda 2010, which was a fundamental belt tightening and shift in the German economy and social structure.
Hmm. Yeah, so here again, I mean, as we said at the beginning of the talk, Mats has really been focused on foreign policy, and this is something where the coalition sees eye to eye. But now that we enter into the autumn season, so to say, and that we have more like economic or also social reform topics on the agenda, it's really something where you can see a clear split between two parties, which doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. I mean, it's obvious, I guess, to everybody who lives in Germany or who follows politics, that the Social Democratic Party is a big fan of the welfare state, and it's one of their principles to have like a strong welfare state, to have strong unemployment benefits and so on, and that they are not gonna be the ones who necessarily want to how do you say, untangle the system or something.
Yeah.
While the conservatives have a fundamental different view when it comes to social security. It's not that they want to do away with social security, but they have more a view that that there are too much people inside the social security system, that people should work, that our society should be more based on how do you, maybe you can help me, on Leistung.
On what they provide, right? On their performance.
Yeah, on performance, and that the state should maybe like take a step back. Also, it's just there are structural problems in Germany. Like, Germany has a population which is getting older and older, so there is also a sense in the Social Democratic Party, in the center left party, that structural reforms of the system are necessary when it comes to unemployment benefits, but also when it comes to pensions, for example. The way the system is built, it's just not gonna work in 10 years.
Hmm.
So there is really
Hmm.
a need for structural reforms. During the coalition negotiations, the parties have not agreed upon a way forward. They have basically agreed to install a commission of experts who will then kind of find a solution to the problems. Also, because the coalition talks happened in a period of very defining geopolitical times, with the US president being elected, with the war in Ukraine. So they basically pushed away those topics, and now this autumn they have to challenge them or come to a solution. And this is, of course, as you said, something the AfD can also profit from, because I think Germany has just arrived. It's not only me, but many people say that Germany has arrived at a point where there is a big need for structural reform. So, as we said, there is no more Russian energy or cheap gas, which
Hmm.
was supporting industry. China is not there anymore as a open market where German cars can be exported to. The population is growing older, and the social security needs to be reformed. So there is really a necessity to kind of change things, or they cannot really go back to the past or how things used to work in the past. But of course, the AfD is presenting this nostalgia as the past, as
Yeah.
something which is possible, and will attack the government for every structural change they make. So they're in quite a difficult position, I would say, at the moment.
And that's another area where sort of domestic policy and foreign policy comes together is around defense. And
Mm.
someone submitted a question asking what the current thinking is on a modified Wehrpflicht,
Mhm.
and also on defense infrastructure. I was actually speaking with a senior advisor in the defense ministry over the weekend who basically said, from a administrative standpoint in the defense ministry, there's just not the capacity to take on more soldiers, whether they're professional soldiers or whether they're part of a military service. They don't have the
Mhm.
barracks, they don't have the equipment. There is so much that needs to be built up. But what have you been hearing about sort of this debate over a new form of Wehrpflicht?
Yeah. Um, so I've heard the same as you've been hearing, especially if we hear at what the Social
Mhm.
Democrats or the center left party has to say, who also have the defense minister. So they are in charge of the defense ministry. But it's also true, like, Germany doesn't have the capacity now to have mandatory conscription service. Like, it would just be an overload, and things would go wrong. At least that's the arguing of Boris Pistorius. The conservatives, again under Merz, would like to see it happening way quicker.
Hmm.
And Pistorius' argument is, as you said, there is not the infrastructure, there is not the barracks. So for now, the government has agreed to what they call the Swedish model. It's based on conscription service in Sweden, where all 18-year-olds will get a letter which they have to fill out, and then based on their answers, the best ones or the most fit ones will be invited for an interview. And in this sense, they hope that the number of soldiers will go up. I don't have the numbers now in my head, but they are looking to reach a certain goal. And if they don't reach this goal, then they will have mandatory conscription service, I think, in 2028, if I'm not mistaken. And otherwise, I mean, we know that even before the coalition came to power, they loosened the debt brake for defense expenditure. So Germany can now spend as much money as it wants for defense. And there are also infrastructure and military infrastructure, things like barracks and so on, are also, I think, one of the top priorities for the defense ministry. So the aim is to build up the capabilities and then maybe possibly at
Yeah.
some point also to make conscription mandatory again.
But that takes time, of
That
course,
takes
right?
time.
That
Yeah,
takes
and
time.
then there is also the question of women. So for this, at the moment, if conscription would come back, it would only be for men, which many politicians also see not necessarily fit for the future, or like as a modern system, let's say. So but if they would like to include women as well, they would need to change the constitution, for which you need a two-third majority. And then again, we are at the question of the AfD, which can block everything. And just the fact that the political landscape is splintered at the moment, and it's difficult to reach such broad-ranging yeah,
Hmm.
majorities.
Yeah. Netta, thank you so much. As we sort of come to a close here, I'd like to maybe look across the border to France, and ask you how closely French politics are being followed in Berlin right now. I think just at the moment that we were starting our talk, the Prime Minister, François Bayrou, was slated to make remarks. And it's expected that he will not pass a vote of confidence today,
Mhm.
and that he'll be out of a job before the end of the day. I think it's worth remembering that Bayrou is Macron's third prime minister in 15 months, and I think his fifth prime minister since taking office. It does not look like Macron's job is on the chopping block, but this kind of upheaval in French politics will weaken him. And the question I have for you is what does that mean for Friedrich Merz, who's trying to build a strong European alliance with people like Macron?
Mhm. Yeah. So we've been asking around also today in Berlin. Politicians up till now are still trying to transpire confidence, I would say. Like they say, yeah, it seems very likely that Bayrou will not be the next prime minister, but France has a stable political system and it will work anyway. Um, my personal point of view is that it's going to be a big problem for Merz. Like the bilateral relationship with France is one of his most, like, on top of his agenda. He has always said that together with France he wants to revive this like European motor. There is a very good personal relationship between Merz and Macron, but as we know, like, the classic disputes are still to be resolved. And for these disputes to be resolved, which would also, yeah, which are also very important on the European level, like they're about defense, for example, or about trade deals with countries outside the European Union. We know that both Merz and Macron would have to make compromises, and of course, it's much more difficult to make a compromise if you're under domestic pressure at home. So I think many people who are watching the German-French relationship, or also France's position in the EU, are a bit worried that a stalemate might occur due to
Hmm.
France's political instability, and this, of course, is a problem for Merz. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Nette, herzlichen Dank. Thank you for this great discussion. We covered a lot of topics,
Mhm.
as we always do at the Kaffeepause, but this has been terrific, and I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye bye.